It's starting to rain here in Saudi Arabia now, which is not going to make it any more comfortable for those troops in the northern Saudi desert tonight as they look across the border and see the flashes of light from air attacks on those Kuwaiti positions that are held by Iraq, knowing that at any moment they may have to charge into that foreboding land. They must be thinking about their fear and their families, as their families are thinking about them. NBC's Roger O'Neill.
It's a special gift for their son and a few other troops. But the soldiers may never see the homemade packages of love if the ground war starts. Derek Hartsfield is on the front with an artillery unit. His mother, Shirley, says his package is not to be opened, but the message on it read and held close to the heart.
Whenever you are lonely or even feeling blue, you only have to hold this gift and know I think of you.
These parents know their son will come under enemy fire when President Bush gives the order to begin the ground war.
That hurts, but Derek, along with all the other thousands of troops that are over there, have been trained for this. This is their job.
The mother in me says, I really don't care, just bring our troops back home, including our son. But the patriotic instinct in me is behind President Bush.
The parents say that's the way their son feels too. He told them that in a surprise phone call just 2 days ago. Derek asked his dad for some small toiletry items and skin cream. Jim Hartsfield was out doing that today. Area hotels donating the items for all the troops. Shirley says they talked to their son for more than an hour. The subject of a ground war was never mentioned.
As a mother, I think Derek, since he didn't talk about going to start fighting, I think Derek was trying to just leave us on a happy keel. And not let us worry, because that's Derek.
Derek said he planned to take a shower, his first in a month, and then go right back to the front lines, ready to fight. Roger O'Neill, NBC News, Aurora, Colorado.
And Jane Pauley, an interesting side note, throughout Saudi Arabia tonight, high officials are saying that they hope that the Saudi troops will be the first to cross the border if there's a ground war. Saudi Arabia has never been in a war before, but both in the air and on the ground, they're pretty proud of their performance so far.
How might they perform, Tom?
Well, they've done well. And that's Nightly News up to the minute. Jane, you and I will be back here again tomorrow night, and of course we'll have continuing coverage around the clock of America at War.
Some say he predicted the future, including the Gulf War.
Pools of oil everywhere and fires being set not only at the oil pumping stations, but at the distribution centers as well.
The toughness of the statement was very much in keeping with what John Cochran just said moments ago, that throughout, the president has perhaps adopted the hardest line on this, John?
That's right, Brian. Now, what I'm not clear, and Tom Brokaw is in a better position than you and I are to know this, is whether or not this noon Saturday deadline means now that military operations are scaled back or stopped in some way. That's not what the president said.
No. No.
Right.
No, I don't think so at all, John. I think they'll just keep hammering him right up until noon Saturday. My question is, are we talking noon Saturday your time or noon Saturday in the Middle East? I can only assume that he means noon Saturday in the theater of operations, which is now about 17 hours from now. Is that your understanding, or are we talking East Coast time?
Well, the president did not say. You know, in the past, remember the famous January 15th midnight deadline? What was midnight? Was that Baghdad time? Was that Dhahran time? Was that New York time? It turned out it was United Nations time, meaning New York time, because that's where the UN resolutions were passed. I would assume that based on that, we're talking about noon Eastern Standard Time, Tom, which would be what? That would be nighttime, your time.
It would be another 8 hours. It's coming up on 7 o'clock right here, so it would be tomorrow night at about 8 o'clock. Nightfall would have started by then in this part of the world. And it is in keeping with everything that we've been able to piece together about what does happen if the ground war is to begin. It probably would begin at night, and there is more and more evidence that we have been picking up from reliable sources around the edges of the battlefield preparation that the field commanders have been told to circle February 24th, that would be early Sunday morning, on their battlefield calendars. So that's what the situation is. The president, I think, wisely kept it Very simple, very clean, took no questions so that there would be no misinterpretation. And now, as they say, the ball goes back to Saddam Hussein's bunker.
Tom, that second point about hearing publicly and authoritatively Saddam's acceptance of those terms, do you think that not only speaks to not wanting to play Saddam's waiting game and giving in to his delay tactics, but to what extent does it also speak to the concern that the administration has that when this is done, Saddam portrays it as a victory?
Well, I think that has something to do with that. I think that they want to get him on the record. Now, the question is, does he have to say that, or can that come from Tariq Aziz in Moscow, if it comes at all? And given his state of mind that we have witnessed almost from the beginning of this, it's very hard for me to see how he'll issue a statement under his signature saying, "You're right, Mr. President, I erred. We're going to get out of Kuwait just as swiftly as possible. We'll be back in Iraq by 1 p.m. on Saturday." Yeah. My guess is as well that the president was more than a little irked by that speech that Saddam Hussein gave yesterday, in which he called the president a liar, in effect, and King Fahd duplicitous as well. And he is saying now, we'll hear what the real character of Saddam Hussein is. You share it with the world.
Yeah, Fred Francis, on your end, the Pentagon, no surprises in listening to the president's words?
No, I'm not surprised at all. Based on everything we've seen from what they've told us about the battlefield here at the Pentagon and preparations for war, not only does the president want Saddam Hussein to withdraw unconditionally and immediately, but if he does not, there are no plans to allow his troops to retreat in battle. And that is really quite significant. The way they, excuse me, the way they have laid this out, Bryant and Tom, is they're going to come around on top of Saddam Hussein's troops. They're not going to allow him even to fight in retreat, which would give him some face-saving gesture. There is no face-saving here in the Arab sense, and there's no wiggle room whatsoever. And what I see is that 24 hours from now, and I believe he was talking in a 24-hour deadline, which is my understanding, 24 hours from now, you're going to see the assault. We've always talked about tactical surprise and how do you surprise them. There is so much confidence at the Pentagon that there's no longer a need for tactical surprise. Saddam Hussein has no air power, and his people can't do anything.
Hey, Fred, we heard the president talking about them launching a scorched earth policy against Kuwait and effectively destroying Kuwait's oil production system. What are people saying there about the extent to which that activity has been stepped up?
Well, they have seen this. They have been waiting for this. They knew he was going to empty the oil tankers off the Kuwaiti coast into the Persian Gulf in the first few days. And they have satellite photographs of the oil wells and the oil heads and the pumping stations, all with demolitions tied to them. And they expected this. The Kuwaitis were told to expect it. But that doesn't destroy the oil reservoir. It just destroys the pumping stations. They expected it. It's coming. And it's not a big surprise here, frankly.
Let's go to Jim Miklashevsky at the... I'm sorry, Tom. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say one other thing, Bryant. One of the UN resolutions that the president has been insisting on, of course, which is in keeping with all of this, is that he wants reparations for Kuwait. He wants Iraq, which is pretty well broke at this point, to find some fashion to pay back the Kuwaitis for the damage that has been done to their country. And that's one of the resolutions from the United Nations that he wants Saddam Hussein to step up to.
I was going to come back in just one moment, and I will. I just wanted to go to Jim Miklashevsky, who perhaps has seen the statement and maybe can shed some light for us on this noon Saturday deadline. Whose time are we talking about, Jim?
Well, we still don't know that. I'd have to concur with John Cochran that according to the last deadline, it was noon Eastern, or it was midnight Eastern Standard Time for the start of the war. So we only have to assume at this point it might be noon Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. I just want to expand just a little bit on what John Cochran said about the president's determination. What has been overlooked, I think, since August 2nd was the fact that President Bush kept referring to the split that Vietnam had created, and this would not be another Vietnam. Everybody assumed he was talking about just the way the battle would be fought on the ground. But as late as last Sunday, when he was taking a power walk on the beach, totally unsolicited, the president brought up Vietnam again. But not in terms of the battle, but in terms of the public mood at home. President Bush was determined to go into this situation and come out with a conclusive end, and that was Saddam Hussein's defeat. Unlike Vietnam, the president wanted to have something he could hang on to, show the American people that the U.S. military went in, did its job, and won. And I think people overlooked that when they started talking about the possibility of negotiation.
All right. Let's go on an open line. We understand Bob Abernathy is standing by with us live from Moscow. And Bob, any official response there yet to the president's ultimatum?
No, Brian. President Gorbachev has been in touch all day with other members of the UN Security Council, and including President Bush, and this announcement surely was one that was discussed with Gorbachev. There's been no meeting between Gorbachev and Foreign Minister Aziz today. Aziz has worked with the foreign minister, but no direct talks, no face-to-face meeting between Gorbachev and Aziz. And it's not at all clear exactly what the status of negotiations is today. Last night, it looked as if there had been an agreement along the 8 points that were announced. Today, we're told, well, no, that was just what Aziz and Gorbachev had agreed to last night. Today, there were the details to be worked out, and one of the things that is not at all clear is the extent to which what Aziz might agree to here is supported by Saddam Hussein in Iraq.
Bob, real quick, we had seen an earlier note that President Gorbachev had in fact scheduled a news conference for later today. Is that still on the board?
It's possible, but it was scheduled and then canceled. And canceled apparently because of all this negotiation going back and forth between the UN Security Council members, and apparently because of lack of progress in the discussions. I would say just this, Bryant, that the Foreign Ministry spokesman said again today that the start of a ground war would vastly complicate negotiations.
It now seems, okay, Bob Abernathy, thank you. It now seems that, frankly, no longer matters what happens in Moscow because the president has set down the conditions, and I guess we've got until noon tomorrow to find out whether there is Iraqi compliance. Tom, we've got about 30 seconds left. Some final thoughts?
Final thought, Brian, is that if there is one consistent thing about Operation Desert Storm and Operation Desert Shield, every time we thought that there was a chance for peace, it turns out to be a step deeper into war, and we have seen that again today.
Okay, well, it would seem the waiting game has come to an end, or at least it figures to, by 12:01 tomorrow. That is, at least if the president is talking about Eastern time. The Pentagon has promised the ground war would be quick, massive, and violent. It would be that by 12:01. The ball is definitely in Saddam's court. We're going to say goodbye to all of those except our stations along the PACnet.
Consider the...
Bush gives Saddam Hussein a high noon ultimatum.
The coalition will give Saddam Hussein until noon Saturday to do what he must do.
This is NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw. Tonight, America at war. Reporting from Saudi Arabia, Tom Brokaw with Jane Pauley in New York.
Good evening from Saudi Arabia, where tonight the clock is ticking toward a deadline that President Bush has thrown down in front of Saddam Hussein. At the same time, the Soviets have not given up on their peace plan, and the Iraqis have their own proposal. But it is President Bush, with the full backing of the Allied coalition, who has the powder primed and ready to fire. His troops, tanks, planes, and ships are all aimed at Iraq tonight, awaiting an answer. We have NBC's John Cochran at the White House and Bob Abernathy in Moscow. John, let's begin with you.
Tom, before delivering his ultimatum today, the president and his Secretary of State, Jim Baker, worked the phones for hours, trying to make sure that the coalition was holding firm and trying to work cooperatively with that would-be peacemaker, Mikhail Gorbachev.
The president paced around his office as his aides tried to contact Gorbachev one last time so Bush could warn him what he was about to say in public. But Gorbachev could not be reached. So Bush emerged anyway to say he was giving Saddam a little time, but not much.
The coalition will give Saddam Hussein until noon Saturday to do what he must do. Begin his immediate and unconditional withdrawal from Kuwait. We must hear publicly and authoritatively his acceptance of these terms.
Although the president thanked Gorbachev for trying to help, Bush's ultimatum is very different from Gorbachev's plan, which gives Saddam 3 weeks to complete his withdrawal. Bush's spokesman, Marlon Fitzwater, said the coalition will give Saddam 1 week.
Within the first 48 hours, Iraq must remove all its forces from Kuwait City and allow for the prompt return of the legitimate government of Kuwait.
Other coalition demands include immediate return of POWs and interned civilians, and removal of all booby traps and mines in Kuwait and Gulf waters. Diplomatic sources say Saudi officials are especially pleased that Bush took their advice when he took a hard line. The British Prime Minister said tomorrow's deadline is firm.
So Iraq now know precisely what they have to do. I hope they recognize that we are not prepared to bargain with them, and we are certainly not prepared to be strung along by them.
President Bush said Saddam is now trying to destroy Kuwait's oil facilities.
We learned this morning that Saddam has now launched a scorched earth policy against Kuwait, anticipating perhaps that he will now be forced to leave.
As the president left for a weekend at Camp David, the Iraqis had not replied to his ultimatum, but an Iraqi spokesman did offer some sarcasm.
Bush might have been hasty to adopt a stance so that he may enjoy his weekend holiday.
The president's men doubt seriously that Saddam will meet the conditions before tomorrow's deadline. They believe there probably will be a ground war. Tom?
Thank you, John Cochran. We'll ask you to stand by there while we go now to Moscow on NBC's Bob Abernathy for the Soviet side of the story. Bob, the latest there now.
Well, Tom, in spite of their efforts to try to prevent ground war, the Soviets did not condemn President Bush's ultimatum. Government spokesman denied there was a good cop, bad cop relationship, but they did speak often of U.S.-Soviet cooperation.
President Gorbachev has been taking views expressed by the U.S. President into account, and I believe that also it goes the other way around.
The Soviet foreign minister negotiated today with the Iraqi foreign minister, trying to find a peace agreement more acceptable to Washington than the one announced yesterday, and they did agree on a specific timetable for Iraqi withdrawal. 21 days after a ceasefire to get out of all Kuwait, 4 days to get out of Kuwait City. They also agreed the unconditional withdrawal would be to wherever the Iraqis were on August 1st, 1990, the day before Iraq's invasion. At the Kremlin tonight, President Gorbachev spoke by telephone with President Bush for 90 minutes, and Gorbachev's spokesman later praised what he called the permanent partnership that has developed between the two countries.
Since the Gulf crisis began, the U.S. and the USSR have constantly acted with each other's interests in mind.
The Soviet Army is deeply concerned about unpredictable escalation of war just across the Soviet Union's southern border and airspace, and there's been growing criticism from conservatives here of Gorbachev's cooperation with the U.S. But at the top of the government, there is no sign yet of any split over the Gulf between the Kremlin and the White House.
We have been trying to work together in the alliance, and we hope that we can be eventually successful.
The Soviets say they can and continue to do all they can to prevent ground war. Those efforts tonight seem to have failed, but the Soviets insist their country and the U.S. should continue to work together to try to solve world problems. Tom?
Thank you, Bob. We want to bring John Cochran into the conversation now. John, if there's not a split between Moscow and Washington, these new relationships strained a bit by what's been going on?
Well, there's a split within the White House. There are some conservatives within the White House who've always been suspicious of Mikhail Gorbachev. They think he's been trying to create mischief. Others within the White House, now I would have to say it is the prevailing opinion here, probably the president's opinion too, from all I hear, which is that Gorbachev is not trying to cause trouble for the United States, but that he was indeed very naive. For example, by giving Saddam Hussein 21 days to pull all of his troops out of Kuwait. Saddam Hussein can pull an awful lot of troops and armored material, armored personnel carriers and weapons back into Iraq in 21 days, Tom.
And Bob Abernathy, what about in Moscow?
Can I comment on that? Well, 21 days is better than nothing, nothing specified. And this time yesterday, nothing had been specified. The 21 days was put together today. That's, in the Soviet view, that's an improvement.
The Soviets are terribly concerned about this ground war, not only for humanitarian reasons, but also the Soviet spokesman Vitaly Churkin said today it could shake the international system. It's just across the Soviet southern border. They're very worried about escalation getting out of hand that close to them.
Thank you, Bob Abernathy in Moscow. John Cochran at the White House tonight. And while the political wars were underway, the shooting war also continued here in the Persian Gulf, again, mostly from the air, from planes and missiles and artillery and rocket fire against Iraqi positions. At the Pentagon, NBC's Fred Francis has been told by one official that fully 50% of Saddam Hussein's armor now has been destroyed. Let's go to the Pentagon now and Fred Francis. Fred, what are they saying there about tomorrow's deadline and the effect that that might have on a timing for a ground war?
Well, Tom, noon tomorrow is only a political deadline for war. Military leaders here say President Bush will at that time give the green light to General Norman Schwarzkopf, but the field commander will pick the time for the battle. Some of the bombs used today by Allied pilots suggest that the ground war will quickly follow the deadline. These Harrier jump jets are dropping napalm bombs and fuel-air explosives on Iraqi front-line trenches. One officer said the bombs are to kill large numbers of Iraqi soldiers. Another said they are to ignite oil which has been dumped in trenches. That and the oil fires started by Iraq are hampering combat preparations.
Covering this area with smoke would make it more difficult for the pilot to find its target.
Officials say that Iraq's systematic torching of Kuwait's 1,000 oil wells is causing a toxic threat to Iraqi soldiers as well as massive pollution.
They're just pools of oil throughout the desert, and they've of course lit off a lot of the wellheads, and a good portion of the country is just covered by black smoke.
Defense officials say they can work around the mess if these soldiers have to go into battle. The only real concern of military officials is that Iraq will get a ceasefire, a respite from the bombing.
To my mind, that correlates directly to dead Americans in the event that it's some kind of a ruse.
Pentagon sources say the 1 week in the president's deadline will not be enough time for a full withdrawal of Iraqi equipment because much of it may not work.
He has, for example, a lot of tanks that have been sitting in holes up in Kuwait from the time the war began, indicating that daily maintenance checks are not being performed on them. I don't have the slightest idea how many of them would even be able to move.
Well, Tom, the Pentagon is certain that at least 2,000 of them will not be able to move. That's how many they think they've destroyed in 37 days of bombing. Tom?
Fred, based on what you have been able to find out, is there any wiggle room in the president's countdown now toward the possibility of a ground war?
Yeah, a senior administration official told me today there is some wiggle room in the countdown, that if Saddam Hussein accepted all of the proposal and just needed another 12, 24, or 48 hours, that the president would probably agree to that. However, there's a caveat. The bombing would continue. Tom?
Thank you, Fred Francis at the Pentagon. When Nightly News continues in a moment, Jane Pauley talks to Tom Aspel in Baghdad and gets the Iraqi point of view.
I was afraid to go to the doctor. I didn't want to hear that I might have an ulcer, but I just couldn't ignore my stomach. You can imagine how relieved I was when my doctor said Mylanta. He told me it wasn't an ulcer. It was indigestion. And indigestion like mine needed a strong medicine.
Mylanta is strong medicine, strongly recommended. In fact, Mylanta is the antacid doctors recommend most.
My doctor said Mylanta.
Send up a crow's. Give me an app check.
There's a place in the friendly skies where not everyone's so friendly.
Stop. Hold it. I need 3 hours minimum. Check it out.
Over 9,000 mechanics of United Airlines work here.
Give me a mini grinder.
They're picky, fussy, stubborn. But if you fly, they're the best friends you'll ever have. United, rededicated to giving you the service you deserve. Come fly the friendly skies.
Disgraceful is what Saddam Hussein's Revolutionary Command Council called President Bush's ultimatum, and it said it does not fear the tyrant forces. NBC's Tom Aspel is in Baghdad. His report and the questions and answers that follow were cleared by Iraqi censors.
Jane, there is little or no chance of Iraq accepting President Bush's ultimatum to withdraw 500,000 men northwards out of Kuwait within 24 hours. Iraq's position now is to maintain its integrity, its sense of honor. On this day, Friday, the day of prayer, Iraqis have been coming to terms with the fact that the battle they have been preparing for is now coming. They know it. It's to be a holy war, a fight to the finish. Air raids on the capital have now become something to be curious about. There have been so many since the war broke out, people no longer run for the shelters. They run to look, to see what kind of planes are hitting Baghdad this time. They're bombing old targets anyway. There's very little left to destroy here. The country is in ruins. Last night, Saddam Hussein told his people this: there is no path but the Iraqi path. If this is to be the path of martyrdom, we are ready. The alternative is humiliation. They also heard him say this: I want the points I have made clearly marked to excuse any Iraqi actions in the future. Tonight, the warplanes are back in action over the city. The Iraqis are floating up tracer fire, trying to bring down the attackers. Baghdad is a city under fire. All of Iraq is now under the gun. There's a sense that time has now run out. We will find out soon now the real meaning behind the threats and promises Iraq has been making since August 2nd. Jane?
Well, Tom, you quoted Saddam as saying yesterday, I want it noted to excuse any Iraqi action in the future. What's that to say?
Jane, we think it means that Saddam Hussein has given instructions to his military commanders that if they are attacked, they have full permission to use every weapon they have at their disposal. We think it's finally come down to this, Jane.
Understood. Is there any chance of another last-minute diplomatic gambit?
Well, now that the Soviet proposal has been thrashed out, talked about, and it seems accepted by the Iraqis, we think that's about the last diplomatic avenue they had. There really doesn't seem to be any other people left for the Iraqis to talk to.
All right, thank you, Tom. Tom Aspel in Baghdad. In a moment, Tom Brokaw in Saudi Arabia and The View from Congress.
Think you can mix a bowl of cereal with more vitamin and mineral nutrition than Total?
With all this stuff, I know I can do that.
Not enough calcium.
Some of that, a little bit of this here one here.
Still not enough calcium. For vitamin and mineral nutrition, nothing can top Total. Nothing.
Oh, come on now. Then we'll put...
Good morning, Lupe. Good
morning.
Think you can mix a bowl of cereal with more vitamin and mineral nutrition than Total?
No, sorry.
When it comes to vitamin and mineral nutrition, nothing can top Total. Nothing.
Ziploc presents Fingerman.
Hi, I'm here to demonstrate a big new idea. That's right, introducing the new Gripper Zipper from Ziploc. Now the easiest closing bag there is. In fact, I can even close it, whoa, blindfolded. I know it's closing because I can feel the zipper grabbing hold. It's locking. Feel it close the first time, every time. And you don't have to see it to believe it. Ooh. Ziploc bags with the new Gripper Zipper. The easiest closing bag there is.
Stouffer's invites you to eat like you really like to eat. Introducing 8 of your all-time home-style favorites, like tender Salisbury steak with our original macaroni and cheese, sliced turkey breast in gravy with homemade stuffing. And to tempt you even more, they're all under 370 calories. So dig in. They're new from Stouffer's.
Just behind the Haynes Mansion in Spring Hill, Tennessee, we're building the brand new Saturn sedan. A car to take you from Monday through Friday to Saturday and Sunday. A car to drive you through your toughest workouts. A car to whisk you off into eternal bliss. Or maybe just to the beach.